This is going to be about political theory. I found a reprint of a political article stuck in a book of mine, and I thought maybe this was important to me once, if I thought enough of it to stick it in that book. So I read it. It was called The Decline of Political Theory, and it was dated 1953, written by a professor at the University College in London. His first sentence was, "Political theory is not a progressive science, designed, I think, to get a chuckle out of most of his readers." I'll repeat it. Political theory is not a progressive science. He argued that political theory had become divorced from political practice, and that this had caused it to lose its vitality, its importance, maybe even its existence. Whenever his argument would reach this point, as it did several times, he would stop and say that possibly he was being overly pessimistic. Near the end of his 15-page paper, he made an apology which I thought was warranted, but he went on to say it was too depressing and that analogies in general are merely the camouflage for loose thinking. That may be so, but I always figured that a decent analogy was an invitation to begin thinking. In any event, here's his analogy. The state appears as a ship on the sea of politics, with no port of embarkation or destination prescribed on its papers, manned by a stressed crew whose whole behavior is devoted to the task of keeping the vessel afloat in uncharted waters, with little to help them save their own traditional seamanship and the records of earlier captains and crews who have for all time been tossed on the seas in the same endless, meaningless motion. I found this to be quite an accurate picture, although I would not call the crew stressed so much as self-serving and vaguely mutinous, unable to agree on how the ship should be run. The image of the government as a ship is common enough, but it is usually seen busily steaming for a fair, if distant, port, not lost and blown in circles, floundering, maybe foundering. It's not 1953 anymore. What then is the condition of political theory? How fares our current ship of state? Its passage is threatened by what is called baggage, or, sticking with the analogy, anchors, huge, heavy weights that threaten to drag the great ship down. For America, those anchors numbers 3. At least 3, maybe more. But these 3 are so enormous that they call into question not only the safety of the ship, but also the hope of ever reaching any harbor. Lost at sea, maybe all civilizations wind up as another Atlantis, tempest-tossed, a mazy, mythic mystery. The first anchor is what we did to the native population. We stripped them from their land, their culture, their food, their religion, and their freedom. We gave them smallpox and firewater. And we did all of that while considering them to be the enemy, the bad guys, those crazy fucking bloodthirsty Indians. The second anchor is slavery. Like what we did to the so-called Indians, this evil doesn't require an explanation. It was a practice that was legal for over 200 years, one where people were treated savagely, like savages. Even in the best circumstances, the slaves were property and had little or no say in the direction of their lives. I just finished reading Uncle Tom's Cabin, so this error in judgment, or lapse of judgment, is fresh in my mind. The third anchor is one we have done to ourselves, and that is the national debt. I think it's over $21 trillion, a figure impressive as Atlantis. And if you would add to that all of the debt of every institution and individual in the land, you would have a super massive sum that will not and cannot ever be rectified. These 3 mistakes, if that is what we will call them, spell the end of the great experiment of democracy. The point is further emphasized when you consider the weapons we have to make war upon each other. That war would be mutual destruction with no possibility of victory. Set against all of this, any political theory would be worthless fluff, a jackstraw, incapable of making any adjustment that would have any effect whatsoever. Political theory is not in decline, it's completely irrelevant, a philosophical toy. Political theory is obsolete because we are. We fucked up. We succumbed to self-indulgence and fantasy. We continue to lumber forward, and our modern politicians wag their tongues and act very official, but it's all folly, posture, and pretense. We are the living dead. Democracy catered to the weak elements in human nature, and it killed itself.